He walked in, saw her, black woman hoodie, best seat on the plane. That was enough for him. He didn't check a single thing, didn't ask her name, didn't say good morning, just marched straight up to her like she'd broken into his house and sat down on his couch, stopped right in front of her seat, looked her up and down, slow head to toe. The kind of look that says, I've already decided what you are. Get up. She looked up from her laptop. He tilted his head, let his eyes move across her hoodie, her shoes, her bag, that full, disgusted scan. Sweetheart, I don't know what bus stop you came from, but this ain't it. This section isn't for people like you. She didn't move. That set something off in him. He grabbed her bag off the seat next to her, both hands, no warning, and threw it down the aisle, hard. Didn't even watch where it landed. You deaf, I said. Get your ass to the back now. She stood up slowly, looked him dead in the eye. Pick my bag up. He laughed, straight to her face. The kind of laugh that says you're nothing to me. Honey, the only thing you need to be doing right now is walking. She didn't walk. He raised his hand, open palm, full force, right across her face. The crack exploded through that entire cabin, hit every wall, bounced off the leather, sat in the air like smoke. She didn't scream, didn't grab her face, didn't beg. She just touched her cheek, looked him dead in the eye. You have no idea what you just did to yourself. 15 minutes later, that same man was on his knees on that tarmac. Have you ever watched someone torch their entire life because they couldn't see past the color of a woman's skin? Pull up. Because this one doesn't end the way he thought it would. Let me take you back to where it started. Van Nuys Airport, Los Angeles. 7:10 in the morning, gold light cutting low across the tarmac, palm trees dead still. The air smelled like jet fuel and hot asphalt. Somewhere across the field, an engine warming up. A woman at the front desk scrolling her phone. Two pilots standing near the gate, talking low, coffee in hand. At 7:12, a black Chevy Suburban pulled up to the entrance. No security detail. No assistant running ahead, no photographer waiting, no driver with a sign, just one door opening, and one woman stepping out, 48 years old. Natural hair pulled back simple, dark slacks, white shirt, grey zip-up hoodie, one leather tote bag on her shoulder, a small silver watch on her left wrist, her grandmother's, nothing expensive. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't talking to anyone, wasn't announcing herself to the room. She just walked through that terminal door like she had nowhere to be in a hurry and everywhere to be at once. Her name was Victoria Chambers. And if you searched her name right now, depending on where you looked, you'd either find everything or almost nothing at all. No Instagram, no celebrity profiles, no day-in-my-life videos, no magazine covers. What you'd find if you dug deep enough, Nova Peak Industries. Founded 22 years ago out of a 2-bedroom apartment in Southside Chicago. Started as a logistics software company, then clean energy technology, then commercial real estate, then federal infrastructure contracts across 13 states. Current valuation $3.8 billion. Victoria Chambers. Founder, CEO, majority shareholder. The whole thing. Hers. She grew up in a neighborhood where success was something other people had. Her mother left when she was 6. Her father was in and out. Her grandparents, Calvin and Ruth, raised her and her younger sister Naomi in a house on the south side that had more love in it than square footage. Ruth cleaned other people's homes. Calvin drove a city bus for 31 years. Every single dollar they didn't spend on survival, they saved. For Victoria, for school, for one real shot at something different. She got a full scholarship to MIT at 17. Only black girl in her engineering cohort. Smartest person in most rooms she walked into, and she learned young that nobody was going to hand her that acknowledgement. She was going to have to build it herself, brick by brick, deal by deal, year by year, so she did. And here's the thing about Victoria that almost nobody outside her world knew. She dressed this way on purpose. No Rolex, no designer bag. No signal flares telling strangers what she was worth. Plain clothes, every single day, on purpose. Because Victoria had a rule she'd kept since the very beginning, back when investors were still deciding whether a black woman from the South Side was worth betting on. She wanted to see how people treated her when they thought she was nobody. Because that, she always said, is the only time you ever find out who they really are. The Gulfstream G650 was sitting on the tarmac at Van Nuys. Tail number NVKP registered to Nova Peak Industries. Every inch of it, hers. She walked through the terminal, gave a nod to Linda at the front desk. Linda had been checking her in for 6 years, knew her without needing to be told, and headed for the air stairs. The jet was managed through Skylux Charter Services. Crew, scheduling, maintenance. $9 million a year in management fees. Victoria's company was Skylux's single largest client account, by a wide margin. She climbed the steps, the cabin door opened, cool air, the smell of leather and cedar from the diffuser near the galley. Sand-colored interior. charcoal trim, 4 oversized seats in the main cabin, conference table with embedded screens, a private suite at the rear behind frosted glass. She settled into her seat, right side, second row, pulled out her laptop, opened the acquisition deck she'd been chewing through for 3 days straight. She was flying to Atlanta to close a $220 million deal. A clean energy infrastructure company Nova Peak had been watching for 2 years. She put her tote bag on the empty seat beside her, put her headphones around her neck, started working. She had absolutely no reason to expect what was about to walk through that cabin door. His name was Derek Sloan, 45 years old, senior flight attendant, Skylux Charter Services, 14 years, pressed uniform, perfect hair, the kind of smile that looked like it had been assembled from a manual and never once questioned. On paper, model employee, on time, organized, rarely missed a shift. But here's what the paper never showed. His co-workers knew. They'd watched the pattern for years. They talked about it in crew vans, in text threads, in break rooms when Derek wasn't in earshot. Because when Derek thought nobody important was paying attention, he was a completely different person. He had a thing with certain passengers. Not all of them. Specific ones, the ones who looked like Victoria. He'd clocked them the second they stepped on board. That slow scan, head to foot to head, like he was already building a file. His tone changed, his patience disappeared, his questions got sharper. He'd stand a little too close, talk a little too loud, question things that didn't need questioning, look at documents like they were probably fake. It wasn't professional skepticism. It was something older and uglier than that. And it had been running unchecked for 14 years. 3 formal complaints filed against him. First one, a black businessman, said Derek refused to call him by his name for an entire flight. Called him Buddy over and over even after being told twice to stop. When the man complained, Derek told the manager the passenger was being oversensitive. Complaint closed, no action taken. Second, a black couple. Derek told them their premium seats had been double booked and tried to physically move them to the rear of the cabin. They had the right documentation. They had every right to be exactly where they were sitting. Derek moved them anyway. Complaint closed. No action taken. Third, filed just 8 months ago, a young black woman traveling alone. Derek made her show her boarding pass 4 separate times during a single 90-minute flight. When she finally asked him why, he looked her straight in the face and said, "Because I need to make sure you're supposed to be here." Closed. No action. All 3 complaints signed off by the same man, Craig Foster, Skylux Operations Director. Same note on every file. Claim unsubstantiated. No further action required. Derek had never once, not one single time, been called into an office and asked to explain himself. So why would he stop? Nobody ever made him. This morning, Derek wasn't even supposed to be on this flight. His regular assignment got swapped because of a maintenance delay on another aircraft. He was reassigned to the Van Nuys charter 40 minutes before departure. He did not review the client manifest, did not check the passenger profile. He boarded that jet, stepped into the main cabin, and saw a black woman in a grey hoodie sitting in the most expensive seat on the aircraft with her laptop open and her bag on the seat beside her, and Derek Sloan, the way he always did, the way nobody had ever once made him pay for, assumed, didn't wonder, didn't check, just decided. And that one decision was about to cost him the entire 14 years he'd built. He didn't walk toward her like she was a guest. He walked toward her like she was a stain he'd been sent to clean up, stopped 2 feet from her seat, squared his shoulders, looked down at her with the particular kind of contempt that someone wears when they've spent years never being corrected. Didn't say good morning, didn't introduce himself. "You need to move right now." Victoria looked up from her laptop. He scanned her again, slow. Let his eyes move across her hoodie, her bag, her shoes, that full assessment that has nothing to do with credentials and everything to do with judgment. "This section is for the owner's party, not for," he paused. Let his eyes drift one more time. "Whoever you are." Victoria opened the Skylux app. Charter confirmation, her name, the flight number, the tail number, today's date. Held her phone toward him. He barely looked at it. "That's just a booking. Doesn't confirm you're authorized to sit here." He said it slowly, like he was explaining something basic to someone who didn't understand basic things. Leaned on every word, enjoying it. "The owner of this aircraft is the CEO of Nova Peak Industries. So unless you're telling me you run a billion-dollar company," he let a smirk sit. "There you're in the wrong seat, sweetheart." Victoria set her phone down on the armrest. "I am the CEO of Nova Peak Industries." Derek stared at her. Then he laughed, out loud, not under his breath, a full laugh, like she'd told the funniest joke he'd heard all week. "Right." He nodded slowly, grinning. "Okay. Sure you are." He crossed his arms. "Look, I don't know what story you've got going in your head, but this is a $65 million aircraft. The people who sit in this section, they don't show up alone in a hoodie with a tote bag. He tilted his head. I've been doing this 14 years. I know what this passenger looks like. And it's not you. He pointed toward the back. Standard seats are in the rear. They'll suit you just fine. Move. She didn't move. She put her headphones on and went back to her laptop. Nah, wait. She just put her headphones on. Like he isn't even there, and I need you to understand what that did to Derek. Because a man who had been running this same playbook for 14 years and had never once in those 14 years faced a real consequence, being flat out ignored by someone he had already decided didn't matter, that was the worst thing she could have done to him. And honestly, she knew exactly what she was doing. Something broke behind his eyes. He stepped forward, grabbed her tote bag off the seat, both hands, no warning, no question, just grabbed it, and turned toward the back of the plane. Victoria's head came up immediately. Headphones off. Put my bag down. He kept walking. I said, put my bag down. I heard you. He said it without turning around, like she was an inconvenience. Then he let the bag drop. It hit the floor and slid hard across the cabin. Her laptop was in that bag. From the galley doorway, Marcus Webb, 24 years old. 4 months on the job, went completely still. Tray of glasses frozen in both hands. Victoria stood up. She walked to her bag, picked it up, set it back on the seat, turned around and looked at him. I want to speak to your captain now. Derek put a hand on his chest like she'd offended him. Oh, you want my captain? He said it loud enough to carry, like he wanted someone to hear this. Honey, you don't give orders on this aircraft. I'm the crew. You're the passenger. I decide who sits where. He pointed toward the back. So one more time, move. Or I call ground security and they drag you off this plane themselves. She didn't move, held his gaze, then said calm and flat, touch my things one more time. Just try it. Derek stepped toward her, close, too close. Lowered his voice to that particular quiet that's worse than yelling. See what happens? He almost smiled. What happens is I pick up that intercom and tell ground security we have an aggressive, unruly passenger refusing all crew instructions. And then men with badges come on board and remove you. He let that sit. And nobody, not one single person, is going to take your word over mine. You know why? He got even quieter. Because I've been doing this 14 years, and women like you complain all the time. And you know what always happens to those complaints? He snapped his fingers. Nothing, absolutely nothing, every single time. He stepped back, smoothed his jacket, straightened his collar like he was tidying up after something. Last chance, get up. She still didn't move. And that stillness, that refusal to flinch, that absolute refusal to submit to a man who had spent 14 years making people submit, broke something open in Derek Sloan that had no business being opened. He raised his hand, open palm, full force, straight across her face. The sound cracked through that cabin like a gunshot in a library. Crack. It hit every wall. It bounced off every surface. It sat in the recycled air like smoke, the kind that changes what a room smells like forever. From the galley, Marcus dropped the entire tray. Glasses exploded on the floor. His hands flew to his mouth. Victoria's head turned from the force of the blow. A red mark spread across her left cheek instantly. She stood completely still. 5 seconds, not one sound in that entire cabin. And here's the part that tells you everything you need to know about Derek Sloan. He didn't look scared, didn't look sorry, didn't look like a man who knew he'd just crossed a line he could never walk back over. He looked satisfied, like something had finally been put in its right place. He pointed his finger directly at her face. Don't you ever threaten me. You grabbed my arm. I defended myself. Every person on this plane just watched you do it. He fixed his collar. His voice shifted, dropped down into something controlled, something practiced. Now I'm calling security, and when they get here, I'm going to tell them exactly what happened. That you became physically aggressive toward a crew member, that you put your hands on me first. He looked her up and down one final time, slow, dismissive, and guess who they're going to believe? The 14-year senior attendant. He looked at her hoodie, or some woman who snuck her way into first class and couldn't handle being told the truth. He turned toward the intercom. Victoria didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't call after him. She reached into her tote bag, 2 fingers, slow and deliberate, pulled out her phone. The screen was already on. The recording app was open. Red timer, counting up 14 minutes, 22 seconds. She had pressed record the moment Derek first marched toward her seat. Audio, video, everything. She set it face up on the armrest. The microphone icon pulsed gently in the cabin light. Then she said it, quiet enough that he had to stop and turn around to hear her. Every word you said, every single thing you did, the bag, the slap, the lie you're about to tell security. She tapped the screen once. All of it is right here. The color left Derek Sloan's face. He stared at the phone. The timer kept climbing, 14:26, 14:28. And then, this is the part that tells you exactly what kind of man Derek was. He smiled, not embarrassed, not caught, not nervous, cold, flat. The smile of a man who has never once, not once in 14 years, paid for anything. He looked at the phone, looked at Victoria, and shrugged. Record whatever you want. He walked back to the intercom. When security gets here, they're going to hear from a 14-year senior crew member that a passenger refused all directives, became physically aggressive, and made contact with my person. He pressed the intercom button. One recording against 14 years on the job. We both know how that math works out. His voice transformed on the intercom, soft, trembling, scared sounding. A performance so clean it had clearly been used before. Ground Ops, this is Senior Attendant Sloan on NVKP. I need security at this aircraft immediately. Female passenger in the owner suite is refusing all crew instructions and became physically threatening. I was forced to use defensive action to protect myself. I feel unsafe. Please send someone now. He released the button, turned back toward the cabin, reset his face completely. Calm, professional, victimized, like flipping a switch. From the galley floor, Marcus Webb sat in broken glass, handshaking, watching Derek stand there like he'd already won this thing. Marcus had seen every single second of what happened in that cabin. Every word, every action. He knew the truth down to his bones. He also knew what happened to people who crossed Derek Sloan. 6 months ago, a junior attendant named Paul had politely corrected Derek during a crew briefing. One small correction, nothing dramatic. Within 3 weeks, Paul was transferred to cargo logistics in Phoenix. Nobody said it was Derek's doing. Nobody had to. So Marcus sat on the galley floor, picking up broken glass with hands he couldn't feel, for now. Footsteps on the air stairs 2 minutes later. 2 ground security officers came aboard. Officer 1. Mid-50s. Built solid. Name tag faded at the edges. The kind of man who had worked this job long enough to not jump to anything. Second, younger, maybe 28. Hand resting near his radio, eyes scanning the cabin before he'd even fully stepped inside. Derek moved to intercept them before they'd taken 3 full steps in. He was performing now, full performance. Hands moving, voice carrying just the right amount of controlled trembling. Thank you for coming. Woman in seat 2. Got on board without authorization. Refused every single directive I gave her, then grabbed my arm and became physically threatening when I tried to manage the situation. I want her removed immediately. He pointed toward Victoria without looking at her directly. She's been hostile since the moment I addressed her. Harlow nodded once, slow, then didn't look at Derek anymore. Walked down the aisle. Victoria was seated, laptop on her lap, phone recording on the armrest, face completely still except for the red mark across her left cheek that had not faded one bit. Ma'am. Officer Harlow, Van Nuys Ground Security.
Can I see some ID, please?
She opened her wallet, handed him her California driver's license. No big movement, no drama. Harlow looked at the photo, looked at her, looked at the name, Victoria L. Chambers. He handed the license back. Stepped 3 feet away, turned his back to the cabin, keyed his radio. Voice low, but in a grounded, quiet jet, sound travels everywhere. Ground Ops, Harlow. Need client verification on tail November Victor Kilo Papa. Confirm the owner client on today's charter. Silence. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The radio crackled back. Officer Harlow, NVKP is registered to Nova Peak Industries. Today's sole charter client is Victoria L. Chambers, CEO and majority shareholder of the registering company. She is the only principal client on file. Harlow lowered his radio, stood very still for a moment, then turned around, not toward Victoria, toward Derek. The look on Harlow's face wasn't dramatic, wasn't loud, it was quiet, and quiet is always worse. The particular look of a man who has just watched someone be catastrophically, completely, irreversibly wrong about something that mattered enormously. He walked past Derek without a word, stopped in front of Victoria. His entire voice had changed. Mrs. Chambers, I sincerely apologize for this disruption. Is there anything at all you need from us right now? Victoria looked at him, then she looked at Derek. 3 words, get him off. Derek Sloan's face collapsed, not loudly, not all at once. Like a building whose foundation just quietly gave. Something that looked solid 3 seconds ago, showing every crack at the same time. His mouth opened, nothing came out for 2 full seconds, then it came out wrong. Stammering, cracking, falling apart. That wait, no. She can't. Look at her. There's no way she's. He pointed at Victoria. His hand was shaking now in a way he couldn't control. She doesn't look like she came alone. She's wearing a hoodie. She doesn't have. There's no way she's the person who. He stopped himself. But it was too late. Way too late. Every person in that cabin heard exactly what he swallowed. The words he couldn't make himself say out loud were louder than every word he'd screamed. She doesn't look like someone who owns a $65 million aircraft, because she's black. The younger security officer's mouth was open. His hand had dropped from his radio entirely. He was staring at Derek the way you stare at someone who has just, in real time, in front of witnesses, shown everybody who they actually are. Nah, hold on. No, she owns the plane, the one he's standing inside of right now. He is wearing a uniform that her company's contract pays for, standing in a cabin that her money built and bought, and he slapped her, and then told her she snuck into first class. I need you to actually sit with that for a second, because what Derek says next, what comes out of his mouth in the next 60 seconds, I promise you it's the worst thing he could possibly do. The cabin went completely silent, the kind of silence that has weight, that presses down, then footsteps from the galley, slow ones. Marcus Webb stepped out, 24 years old, 4 months on the job, both hands at his sides, face pale as paper. Jaw set with the look of someone who has made a terrifying decision and is doing it anyway before they can talk themselves out of it. He looked directly at Harlow. His voice shook when it started, but it did not stop. I need to tell you what I actually saw happen in this cabin. Derek's head whipped around. Marcus, don't you dare. He approached her without checking any documentation. Marcus kept his eyes locked on Harlow. Didn't get Derek, Rick. She showed him her booking confirmation on her phone. He dismissed it without barely looking at it. He picked up her bag off the seat without asking and threw it down the aisle. She told him to stop. He threw it hard enough that it slid across the floor. His voice was getting steadier with every sentence, like the act of saying it out loud was making it more real. She never grabbed him, never touched him, never made any threatening contact. She pulled back when he got in her face, a reflex, that's it, that's the only contact there was. He swallowed once, he slapped her, full force, open hand, across the face, then stood over her and told her he was going to report her for assault when she was the one who'd just been hit. Marcus finally looked at Derek. She never touched him. I was 5 feet away. I watched every single second of it. The cabin was so quiet after that you could hear the ventilation system cycling air through the ducts. Derek turned to Marcus. His voice went very soft, very quiet. The silk over something sharp version of him that was somehow worse than the yelling. You've got 4 months. 4 months on this job. You think you understand how any of this works, He took one step toward him. When this is over, and it will be over, I am going to make sure you never work in aviation again. Not here. Not with any other company. Not in this country. I will personally end your entire enough. Harlow's voice cut through the entire cabin like a door slamming in a quiet house. Mr. Sloan, stop talking. Right now. Derek stopped. The cockpit door opened. Captain Linda Reyes stepped out, 51 years old, 22 years in the air. The kind of calm that isn't soft. It's built from thousands of hours of making hard decisions in small spaces with no room for error. She still had her headset around her neck. She'd been monitoring the security radio channel for the last 3 minutes. She took in the whole room. 10 seconds, Harlow, the young officer, Victoria in her seat, the red mark still visible on her left cheek. Marcus in the galley doorway. Derek in the middle of the cabin with his career quietly ending around him. She walked to Harlow. 2 sentences, low voice. He nodded twice. Then she turned to Derek. Voice flat, military precise, no room for interpretation. Mr. Sloan, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. Collect your personal belongings. You have 60 seconds to deplane. Derek's mouth opened. Captain, if you would just give me a chance to. That was not a request. 60 seconds. Starting now. Derek stood there for 8 of those 60 seconds. His eyes went around the room one last time. Harlow, the young officer, Marcus, the recording still pulsing quietly on the armrest. Then to Victoria. Victoria wasn't looking at him. She was back on her laptop, already working, already past him, like he was a problem she'd solved and filed away and moved on from, like he didn't exist anymore. Derek grabbed his crew bag from the galley. His movements were all wrong, jerky, too fast, frantic. The polished composure he'd worn like armor for 14 years had come apart all at once, and what was underneath it was just a man who had never once been held accountable for anything, suddenly being held accountable for all of it at the same time. He walked down the aisle. At the top of the air stairs, he turned back. His mouth opened. The cabin door swung shut. The last thing he saw was the back of Victoria Chambers' head. Still, unmoved, already somewhere else entirely. Derek Sloan stood alone on the Van Nuys tarmac in the Los Angeles morning sun, watching a jet that would never have him on it again begin to power up its engines. The G650 lifted off at 7:58 a.m., clean climb through pale California morning into open blue sky. Inside the cabin, still. Marcus brought Victoria a glass of water, set it down carefully. His hands were still shaking slightly. He started to turn back toward the galley without saying anything. Marcus, he stopped. What you just did, that took real guts. I want you to know that. His eyes went wet for a second. He disappeared back into the galley before it could go any further. Victoria set her laptop aside, picked up her phone. The recording was already backed up. 3 copies, 3 separate cloud accounts. Auto-uploaded the moment the file was saved. She'd set that system up years ago. Not because she planned for something like this morning, because she knew something like this morning was always a possibility. She made 2 calls. First one, Adrian Cole, her attorney for 17 years, Harvard Law. Built her practice on corporate litigation and civil rights cases. The person you called when something needed to be handled fast, and handled right and handled completely. Second ring. Tori, it's early, talk to me. Victoria told her everything. Her voice was flat and level the entire way through. No heat, no drama. The same way she described any problem that needed solving, because that's exactly what this was, a problem. And Victoria Chambers had been solving impossible problems since she was 17 years old in a world that hadn't expected much from her. Adrian was silent for almost 12 full seconds when she finished, then careful and quiet. I've watched you walk away from situations like this. I've watched you take the quiet road because you valued your privacy and you didn't want the attention, and I've never pushed you. She paused. I'm pushing you now. Don't let this one go. I wasn't going to. Good. I'll have a full action plan before your wheels touch Atlanta. Call her sister, Naomi Chambers, 41 years old, sharp, warm. The person Victoria called when she needed to remember she was a human being and not just a machine that solved problems. Co-founder of a non-profit focused on education access in underserved communities. The one person in Victoria's life who could cut through every wall she built. When Victoria finished telling her, 6 full seconds of silence on the line. Then Naomi's voice, very quiet, the way she got when she was the most serious she ever was. He slapped you. On your own plane. Yes, Victoria. He stood in your cabin in a uniform your contract pays for, and he put his open hand across your face. I know, Naomi. A long pause, then Naomi's voice shifted. Low, steady, done processing. How many people has he done this to who didn't have a recording? Silence. That's the question, Victoria said. Then don't let it stay quiet. I'm not. Good. A beat. Call Sandra. Victoria looked out the window, the California coast falling away beneath her, after Adrian does her work. Okay, but Tori, Naomi's voice went soft for a second, actually soft. What happened to you this morning was wrong. Not just legally, just wrong. You know that, right? You don't have to carry it like it was nothing. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. Then she went back to her work. Adrian Cole moved like someone who had been waiting for exactly this phone call. While Victoria was still in the air over California, 4 things were already happening simultaneously. 1. Formal battery complaint filed with the Los Angeles County DA's office. Full audio-video recording attached, time-stamped, chain of custody documented and sealed. 2. The recording sent to Skylux Charter Services Legal Department with a formal demand letter. Written response required within 48 hours. Full disclosure demanded. Derek Sloan's complete employment history, every single complaint ever filed against him, every investigation conducted, every dismissal, every name of every manager who signed off on every closure. 3. An independent third-party audit of Skylux's entire complaint handling infrastructure demanded. Not their lawyers, not their consultants. An outside civil rights compliance organization with zero financial ties to Skylux and full, unobstructed access to everything. 4. Formal notification delivered to Skylux Charter Services that Nova Peak Industries was reviewing its charter management contract, $9 million a year. Skylux's largest account by a significant margin. Victoria approved every single word. The final line of the demand letter read, Nova Peak Industries does not maintain business relationships with organizations whose internal structures allow repeated racial discrimination to continue unchecked. The letters hit Skylux's legal inbox at 9:47 a.m. Pacific Time. Victoria's wheels still hadn't touched Atlanta. Richard Graves, 56 years old, CEO of Skylux Charter Services, 18 years building a brand that stood for precision, discretion, and elite service. His name appeared in aviation industry publications twice a year. His company had a waiting list. He was in his Beverly Hills office reviewing a partnership pitch deck over coffee when his legal department forwarded an email marked urgent. He opened the attachment, pressed play. 13 minutes, 52 seconds. He watched Derek Sloan walk onto an aircraft registered to the woman he was about to abuse and look at her like she'd crawled in through a ventilation shaft. Heard his senior crew members dripping with something that had absolutely nothing to do with professional skepticism and everything to do with who she was. Watched Derek grab her bag and throw it. Watched Derek plant himself in the aisle. Watched Derek raise his open hand and bring it full force across Victoria Chambers' face. Then heard Derek's intercom call, soft, trembling, completely fabricated. Richard watched all 13 minutes and 52 seconds. Then he called his legal team, then HR, then pulled Derek Sloan's full unredacted employee file. What he found in that file, the real one, not the polished summary version, made him sit back from his desk with both hands flat on the surface and a face the color of old concrete. 3 complaints, 3 closures, all signed by Craig Foster, same note every time. Claim unsubstantiated, no further action required. He picked up his phone to call Victoria directly. Adrian answered instead. Mr. Graves, miss. Chambers won't be taking direct contact from Skylux until a full written response to our demand letter has been received. You have 48 hours. After that, silence will be treated as confirmation that Skylux does not consider this matter urgent. She hung up. Richard set his phone down, stared at his wall, the framed magazine covers, the award from the Aviation Industry Association, the photo with his management team from 3 years ago. He didn't know yet that the final blow was still on its way. 24 hours. That's all it took. Skylux's legal team reviewed the recording 3 times, 3 different lawyers, 3 identical conclusions. Unprovoked battery, fabricated security incident report, 0 gray area, 0 room for an alternative reading. The kind of case that makes lawyers go quiet because there's nothing to argue. By 2:30 p.m. the following day, Derek Sloan was terminated. Not suspended pending review, not quietly reassigned to a different route. Terminated, effective immediately, a certified letter, 14 years gone. But the recording didn't just end Derek's career, it cracked something much uglier open underneath it. When HR pulled Derek's complete history and ran the full complaint database, 3 complaints, all from black passengers, all closed by the same manager with the same language, the legal team went very, very quiet. Craig Foster was placed on administrative leave the same afternoon. He never came back to his desk. Derek hired an attorney within 18 hours. Wrongful dismissal claim. His argument, Victoria escalated the situation. He perceived a physical threat, the slap was defensive. His attorney released a public statement calling the termination premature, reactive, and politically motivated. Nobody bought it. The recording existed. The recording didn't care about statements or press releases or 14 years of seniority. Richard Graves sent Victoria a settlement offer, formal written apology, lifetime complimentary charter services, $600, Zusan for emotional distress and reputational harm. Adrian sent back 3 sentences. Miss Chambers is not for sale. Neither is her dignity. She has alternative demands. Victoria laid them out. 1. A public, formal, legal acknowledgement from Skylux Charter Services that their complaint handling infrastructure had, through documented, systemic negligence, allowed racial discrimination to continue unchecked for years. Not a PR statement written by their communications team. A real acknowledgement, with real language in public. 2. A complete independent audit of Skylux's HR procedures and complaint systems, conducted by an external civil rights compliance organization. Full unobstructed access to every file. An outside team with no financial relationship to Skylux. 3. Mandatory anti-bias and racial equity training for every single Skylux employee. Flight crew, ground staff, operations managers, executives, every one of them. Designed and delivered by the independent audit organization. Funded entirely by Skylux. Richard Graves agreed to all 3 within 36 hours, didn't negotiate a single line. Because Victoria followed through on what she'd told Adrian from the start. Nova Peak Industries formally terminated its charter management contract with Skylux Charter Services. The termination letter was 1 page. The final sentence read, Nova Peak Industries does not maintain business relationships with organizations whose institutional culture enables repeated racial discrimination against its principal. $9 million a year, gone. The entire fleet transferred to a competing charter company with a verified audited equity compliance record. Transition completed in less than a week. 3 days after the termination, Victoria called Sandra Park, 43 years old, investigative journalist, 11 years covering corporate racial bias, institutional discrimination, and the human cost of both. Her work had been cited in congressional hearings. Her stories hadn't just gone viral. They had ended careers of people who genuinely believed their institutional armor made them permanently untouchable. Victoria gave her the recording, full written consent, everything. Sandra spent 5 days verifying every single fact, flight manifest, security logs, Derek's full complaint history. She interviewed Marcus Webb on the record, his first time speaking publicly about any of it. She obtained Skylux's internal HR documents through a protected source inside the company. She reached out to Derek Sloan for comment. He declined. The story went live on a Thursday, 6 a.m. Eastern. Headline, Billionaire slapped on her own jet. Inside the incident that exposed years of racial bias at Skylux Charter Services, Sandra included key audio clips from the recording, not everything, just enough. Derek's voice, "People like you don't sit here." The sound of the bag hitting the floor, the crack of the slap, and then the silence. 4 seconds of silence. People said that silence said everything that words couldn't. 4 seconds of a woman sitting completely still after being hit on her own aircraft, on a plane she owned, in a cabin she paid for, in a seat she'd sat in dozens of times before. That 4 seconds destroyed Derek Sloan all over again, every time someone played it. Within 10 hours of publication, 5 million plays. End of day 1, 11 million. By day 3, 21 million and still climbing. Every platform, every cable channel, every morning show. The story didn't trend. It detonated. Comment sections across every platform filled with the same things. She built a $3.8 billion company and he assumed she snuck in 3 complaints, 3 closures. The system worked exactly the way he knew it would. She didn't scream, she didn't beg, she just pressed record. But the internet wasn't the only place consequences were stacking up. 6 weeks after Sandra's article, the Los Angeles County DA's office filed formal criminal charges against Derek Sloan. Count 1, battery. The recorded, time-stamped strike, corroborated by Marcus Webb's sworn testimony and Officer Harlow's official incident report. Count 2, filing a false report. Derek's intercom call describing physical aggression that never happened, directly and completely contradicted by nearly 14 minutes of unedited audio-visual evidence and every witness who was present in that cabin. Derek's attorney pushed hard for a plea arrangement, reduced charges, community service, no criminal record. The DA, holding the kind of case lawyers remember for their entire careers, offered nothing. The case went to trial 4 days. Could have been one afternoon. The prosecution played the full recording on a screen in a silent courtroom. 13 minutes and 52 seconds edited. Every word, every sound, every second of that cabin playing in front of 12 jurors who sat completely still. Marcus Webb took the stand, 24 years old, visibly nervous, hands gripping the edges of the witness box. But his testimony was sequential, clear, and unshakable. He described what he saw in the exact order it happened. Every time Derek's attorney tried to introduce an alternative reading, Marcus answered with the same thing. What he saw, he never wavered once. Captain Linda Reyes submitted a written statement confirming Derek Sloan had not reviewed the client manifest before boarding, a direct violation of Skylux's standard operating procedure, a step he had knowingly skipped. Officer Harlow testified that upon arrival, Victoria Chambers was seated with no signs of aggression and a visible red mark on her left cheek consistent with an open-hand impact. Then Derek took the stand. His attorney had coached him carefully. Stay calm, show some remorse, contextualize the recording, help the jury understand the pressure, the perceived threat, the complexity of the situation. The cross-examination broke in 7 minutes. The prosecutor asked one question. Mr. Sloan, in your own words, what specific evidence caused you to doubt that Chambers was the principal client on her own aircraft? Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She didn't look like... Didn't look like what, Mr. Sloan? I mean, she wasn't dressed like someone who would. He stopped. His eyes went to the jury, all 12 of them, looking at him, waiting for him to finish the sentence. He couldn't finish it. He didn't have to. Every single person in that courtroom heard exactly what he couldn't make himself say out loud. She didn't look like she belonged there, because she was black. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 20 minutes. Guilty both counts. The judge handed down the sentence. 24 months probation. 250 hours community service to be completed at a civil rights education center. $20,000 fine. Permanent criminal record on every background check for the rest of his professional life. Derek stood in the courtroom as the verdict was read. Didn't react, didn't cry. Just stood there, stiff and hollow, staring at a fixed point on the wall ahead of him. Like a man looking for a door he's only now realizing was never there.
The Skylux audit concluded 7 weeks after the incident. Released publicly as part of Victoria's demands, the findings were damning. Systemic pattern of unaddressed bias complaints, disproportionately from Black and Latino clients. Inadequate documentation, no accountability structure, a culture of institutional silence enabled at every level by middle managers like Craig Foster, who treated discrimination reports as paperwork to be processed and forgotten, not human beings who deserved an answer. 4 additional Skylux employees terminated based on audit findings. Craig Foster fired for cause. Severance revoked. Richard Graves stepped down as CEO 11 months after the incident. His statement cited personal reasons. The industry didn't believe him. Skylux lost 2 more major clients within 6 months of the story breaking. Stock took 14 months to recover to pre-incident levels. The brand Richard Graves had spent 18 years constructing, permanently damaged, not by the incident itself, by the years of ignored complaints that made the incident inevitable. Derek Sloan applied to 4 aviation companies after his termination. All 4 said no, applied to 3 hospitality companies, same result. His name had become a reference point in HR departments, in compliance offices, in training seminars across the industry, not as a villain in a story, as a case study. What happens when bias goes unchecked, unnamed and unaccountable, until one morning, one person, one recording makes it impossible to close the file and walk away. A local news outlet tracked him down 8 months after the trial. He'd moved states, working in retail, declined to comment. The reporter described him as a man living in the permanent shadow of one morning he couldn't take back. Victoria Chambers gave one interview after it all ended. Sandra Park, 3 months after the verdict, Sandra asked what she wanted people to take away. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I don't want people to remember my name," she said. "I want them to remember that this almost didn't come to light. If I hadn't pressed record that morning, it was his word against mine. And we both know how that ends." She paused. "But the people I think about are the 3 before me, the businessman, the couple, the young woman who had to show her boarding pass 4 times. They said something happened, and the system told them there wasn't enough evidence and closed the file. They didn't have a recording. They didn't own the plane." She looked at her hands for a second. "They deserved the same outcome I got." 3 months after the verdict, Victoria established the Chambers Equity Fund, $12 million, personal funds. Its one purpose: free expert legal representation for people who face racial discrimination in aviation, hospitality, and service industries. The people whose stories would otherwise end in a drawer stamped insufficient evidence. Year 1, 97 cases across 14 states. 14 reached settlements. 5 went to trial, all 5 won. 3 major hotel groups reached out for consulting partnerships. A national airline completely revised its bias reporting protocol after one of the fund's cases exposed the exact same institutional failures in their own system. Victoria reviewed the case reports personally every quarter. No press conferences, no credit sought, no announcements. She still flies private, still wears the zip-up hoodies, still has the silver watch her grandmother gave her, still walks through terminals alone. No entourage, no announcement, no signal that she's anything other than whoever you decide she is when you first look at her. She still records. Every time. Every time she senses something shift in a room, her phone is ready. Because Victoria Chambers learned long before that morning at Van Nuys that in a world that judges you by what it sees, proof isn't a backup plan. It's how you survive. Victoria closed the Atlanta deal, $220 million, no complications. Nova Peak expanded into 4 new markets the following year. Revenue crossed $4. $5 billion for the first time. She didn't change. In the quiet part of that Sandra interview, after the recorder was put away, when it was just 2 women sitting across from each other, Victoria said one more thing. "The thing that stays with me isn't the slap. It's the look on his face when he first walked through that cabin door. Like my presence there needed explaining. Like I had to justify taking up space in a seat I owned." She was quiet for a second. "I've been that problem to certain people my whole life. The difference this time was that the truth had somewhere to go. Marcus Webb never went back to Skylux. He didn't have to. The charter company that absorbed Nova Peak's fleet management offered him a senior flight attendant position, a title that would have taken 6 more years to earn at Skylux. He accepted the same afternoon. An aviation trade publication asked him 3 months later why he stepped out of that galley, knowing what it could cost him. He thought about it for a moment. "Because I saw what happened," he said, "and staying quiet would have made me part of it." He paused. "I've known what silence costs. It costs more than people realize. The person carrying it pays the highest price." He stopped, then added, "Silence isn't neutral. That morning I just finally understood it, clearly enough to actually do something about it." All right, the characters, the jet, the 3.8 billion, all of it fiction. I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise. But that look, the one Victoria got when Derek walked through that cabin door, that slow scan, head to toe, that quiet decision that she didn't belong, made before he checked a single thing, before he asked a single question, before she said a single word. That's not fiction. That happens every day. In airports, in hotels, in boardrooms and restaurants and stores and every space where someone with quiet authority meets someone with quiet bias, and only one of them is holding a recording. And most of the time, there is no recording. There is no $9 million contract leverage. There is no attorney on speed dial. There is no Marcus willing to step out of the galley and say what he saw, knowing what it was going to cost him. Most of the time, there is just a person going home, carrying something heavy, that nobody else saw get put on them. That's the story inside this story. That's the part that doesn't go away when this video ends. That's the part that was never fiction.